Welcome back, everyone. We have a really fascinating and I think incredibly practical deep dive for you today.
Hmm. Practical is the word. We're not just floating around in abstract philosophy this time. This is almost like sitting in on a radical therapy session.
It really is.
Mm.
We are jumping into a source that feels less like a metaphysical text and more like a direct psychological intervention.
Yeah, a prescription for psychic health. It's all about self-sabotage, really, and then
Mm.
and then the steps for self-renewal.
Okay, so the source for all of this is session 77 of the Early Sessions Book 2 of Seth Material.
Right.
And this was recorded way back on Wednesday, August 5th, 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And just for a little context for anyone new, this is the ongoing record of Jane Roberts, who Seth calls Ruburt, channeling the entity Seth,
Hmm.
and her husband, Robert Butts, who Seth calls Joseph, is meticulously taking all the notes.
And that context it's just so important here because the notes from the time make it really clear that Jane and Robert were, well, they were struggling. They were in what they called a low psychic ebb, just drained, anxious about money, about their careers, just feeling all the friction of the life they were leading.
So this isn't Seth giving a lecture to the world.
No, not at all. This is an intervention. He's stepping in to talk to them directly. He identifies the root of their burnout, their fear, and then he lays out this incredibly specific, like, three-part plan for getting better.
And that's our mission today. We're going to unpack that whole intervention. We'll start with this surprising diagnosis he gives, this idea of fear showing up as aggression.
Yeah, the overcompensation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then we'll dig into this core Seth principle about expectation being a two-way door. And then the most important part, we'll get into the actual prescription.
The practical stuff, the mandatory rest, the immersion in nature, and this brilliant idea of needing a psychic breath of fresh air.
It's all so good. But before we get into it, we should make our usual declaration.
Of course.
This deep dive is, as always, distributed completely free of charge on all major platforms, and it's for educational purposes.
And we absolutely have to credit the Seth Material and its publisher, New Awareness Network, for making all this incredible work available.
Okay, so the diagnosis, Seth just jumps right in, doesn't he? No preamble.
No time wasted. He cuts straight to what he sees as the central contradiction in Ruburt and Jane, and the image he uses. It's kind of hilarious.
It really is. It's not at all what you'd expect for someone channeling this profound entity.
Not at all. He starts off by saying, and I'm paraphrasing a little, "You certainly frightened our rabbit Ruburt this evening."
The rabbit.
A rabbit. He goes on, "He is far more timid in his relations with the outside world than even you perhaps suppose."
Okay, so a rabbit.
Yeah.
We're talking about Jane Roberts.
Yeah.
A person with, immense inner confidence who is literally talking to non-physical beings. How does that square with being a timid rabbit? It seems like a total contradiction.
Well, that's exactly the duality that Seth is pointing out. It's the whole key to the problem. He's very clear that Ruburt is inwardly confident. He says, he is confident of his basic worth as an individual, as a writer, and even, finally, as a wife in relationship to you.
So the core self-esteem is solid. No issues there.
None. The foundation is strong.
Yeah.
But the moment that confident self has to, deal with the outside world, especially with things like business or money or social situations she's not used to, the reaction is just immediate. It's fear, hesitation, retreat.
That's the rabbit.
That's the rabbit. The powerful inner knowledge hasn't fully connected with the outward-facing part of her personality.
So it's not a self-esteem problem. It's an environmental interface problem, a fear of the outside world. Where does that come from? Seth says it's inherited, right?
Precisely. It's not something that grew out of her adult life. He calls it a psychological and emotional heritage. He says she picked up his mother's distrust of the outside. It was basically programmed into her as a child.
Wow. That's so relatable. It's almost painful.
Isn't it?
It means your most evolved, intellectual adult self can still be running on this old boogie software that your parents installed decades ago.
The notes mention she lived under, close supervision in a very small area. So even though she was encouraged intellectually, the emotional message she got was, the world out there is scary, it's chaotic, it's probably going to hurt you.
It's like an invisible fence.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Your brain says, I'm free, I can do anything. But your gut, your subconscious programming, starts screaming the second you get near that childhood boundary.
And that's why she was hitting the panic button every time they had to make a business decision or expand their world. It was that old programming kicking in.
Okay, but she couldn't just hide in her apartment forever. She was a social person. So she had to develop a way to cope with that fear.
And she developed a very sophisticated one. Seth diagnoses this appearance of confidence and the engaging social self as a deliberate cover-up. A strategic mask, yeah. It was designed to buy her time, to let her get her bearings in a new situation that felt threatening.
And it's a fascinatingly destructive way to cope, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you feel small and scared, you project huge and aggressive.
Exactly. But the best part, the most detailed and frankly funny part of the analysis is when Seth describes how this plays out at parties.
Yes, the hilarious performance.
Yeah.
This part is just gold.
He does not hold back. He says that her rather hilarious performance in an unaccustomed social gathering is caused by this fear.
Okay.
And the spectacular aggressive behavior represents an attempt to strike before he is struck.
Whoa. That's a bombshell of psychological insight right there.
It is.
It completely reframes how you see that kind of person.
Mm.
The one who's the loudest at the party, the one with the quickest joke, the most dominant conversationalist. You think, wow, they're so confident, so comfortable. But Seth is saying, no, that's not confidence, that's combat.
It's a preemptive strike.
She's so terrified of being exposed or judged that she seizes control of the whole social dynamic before anyone else can.
And just think about the energy that takes.
Oh, it must be exhausting.
You're not just chatting with people, you're performing this high-stakes defensive maneuver constantly. It's no wonder they were feeling that low psychic ebb. All their energy was going into maintaining this facade.
It also just turns the whole introvert-extrovert idea on its head. We think fear looks like being quiet and shy.
Right.
But sometimes fear looks like the biggest extrovert in the room. The person who's terrified of silence because that's when the outside judgment can sneak in.
And Seth connects this exact defense mechanism to a job she used to have, selling door to door.
Which, on the surface, seems like the worst possible job for a timid rabbit.
You'd think so, but it actually worked perfectly for her psychology. It flipped the power dynamic.
How so?
Seth explains that when she was the one selling, he was master of the situation and was indeed the invader. The hapless householder was on the defensive.
So she got to be the one on the attack.
Exactly. She was the one knocking, the one creating the surprise. It was a controlled environment where she could use her strike before I'm struck strategy and have it actually work.
It's amazing how we find jobs that perfectly fit our psychological quirks, our deepest insecurities.
But he says that coping mechanism was starting to fail her.
Why?
Because her goals had changed. Seth points out that she now wanted prestige in terms of position and financial benefit that earlier did not concern him.
So selling stuff door to door was just a transaction, but now she wanted to be a respected author and channel.
Right, and that requires a totally different approach. You're asking the world for long-term validation, not a short-term sale.
And you can't get that through a series of spectacular aggressive performances.
You can't. It requires vulnerability. You have to put your real work out there and let people judge it. The old defense system, the invader mindset, was actually sabotaging her new goal.
Her ambition had outgrown her coping mechanisms.
Perfectly put. And that internal conflict leads right into this idea of the discipline paradox.
Okay, explain that.
Seth points out this contradiction in her. On one hand, she's capable of this wild exuberance, almost no discipline at all.
The creative psychic side.
Right, which he calls a safety valve. But then on the other hand, she has this ability to just hide completely within schedule and habit.
That is the absolute classic burnout cycle, isn't it?
It is.
You're either totally wild and free,
Yeah.
or you're locked down in a rigid routine because the world feels too scary.
The fearful rabbit takes over and demands control. So the pendulum swings from chaos to this psychological bunker made of schedules and habits.
And that's where the danger lies.
Seth gives a warning. He says, discipline is necessary for him, but fear could lay the discipline on with too strong a hand.
So discipline born from fear isn't helpful structure. It's a prison.
It's a cage, yeah. It smothers the very spontaneity and freedom she needs to do her work, to channel, to write.
Wow. So that's the diagnosis, inherited fear, which leads to this exhausting, aggressive cover-up, which leads to this swing between chaos and a self-imposed prison. No wonder they felt drained.
Exactly. And all of that sets up the next part of the session, where Seth has to remind them of the fundamental rule of their reality, the thing that governs all of this.
Expectation.
Expectation.
Okay, so we're moving from the really personal diagnosis of this inner rabbit to the universal law that's actually creating the problem, the two-way door of belief and expectation.
Right. This is the core teaching of all the Seth material, but here he's applying it like a precision tool.
He's saying, if Section 1 was about bad habits, this section is about a bad mental framework.
Yes. He brings them right back to basics. He says, perhaps you will see how expectations are indeed translated by the individual into concrete reality. He's reminding them of something they already know but aren't really applying.
And he says the proof is right in front of them. The fact that the sessions are even happening, he's able to speak through Jane.
That's the proof of the principle. It's happening because their deep inner expectations made it possible. They expected this connection, and so it manifested.
But that powerful inner expectation isn't translating to their outer life, their finances, their social interactions.
Because their minds aren't open enough to allow it to. And that's where he brings up this idea of the open mind advantage.
Which isn't just about being smart or curious.
No, he frames it as a technical requirement for this kind of work. An open mind is one of the best advantages you can have because it gives you the flexibility to let newer, better realities in without having to completely destroy your old beliefs.
Which leads right into this concept of belief as a two-way door. This is a big one.
It's huge, and it's easy to misunderstand, so it's worth slowing down here. Seth is trying to get them to see why two beliefs that seem to contradict each other can actually exist at the same time.
Okay, so let's use his analogy, the colors.
Right? He says a belief in the color red does not negate belief in the color green.
And physically, that makes perfect sense. Of
Yep.
course, they both exist. We see it every day.
But when you take that idea into the world of abstract beliefs about money or safety or success, we suddenly think it has to be one or the other. We create a false choice.
We operate on like a scarcity model of reality.
Exactly. We think if A is true, B must be false. So, for example, you might have a deeply held spiritual belief in, say, universal abundance. That's belief A.
Right.
But you might also have this deep inherited belief from your family that to make money, you have to suffer and struggle. That's belief B.
And those two feel like they're in direct opposition.
They do. So what happens when you get an opportunity for easy, abundant money? Your internal system short circuits. It often rejects the easy money because it violates that deeper, older programming about suffering.
You're limiting yourself because you can't hold both ideas at once.
Right. And this is the key phrase from Seth. When one belief seems to cancel out another, it may simply be because your acceptance or expectation is not expansive enough to include both.
So the problem isn't reality. Reality is big enough for both spiritual abundance and easy money.
Yeah.
The problem is the container in our own mind is too small.
Yes. Our expectation is too narrow. Let's bring it back to Ruburt.
Okay.
She has a firm belief in her own worth as a writer, as a psychic. That's a solid belief. But she also has this powerful inherited expectation that the outside world is hostile and dangerous.
And her expectation isn't big enough to include both her inner worth and the possibility of a safe, welcoming outer world.
Exactly. She's essentially living in a state of, I know I'm good, but I expect to be attacked, so I have to attack first.
And that internal paradox is just,
Yes.
it's burning all her energy.
It's a massive energy drain. And Seth points out that these sessions, this whole process, is actually speeding up the learning curve. They are on an accelerated path to realizing their outer world has to match their inner one.
But their bodies, their emotions, their ingrained habits, they can't keep up with that new psychic understanding.
They're lagging behind. And that's why the rest of the session isn't more theory. It's all about action. Radical, practical, physical action to basically force their whole system to reboot and accept a bigger reality.
They need a system reset.
Desperately. Which brings us to the prescription itself. And it starts with a command to just stop.
Okay, so this is section 3, the prescription for psychic renewal and balance. We've had the diagnosis, we've had the theory. Now this is the what to do about it part. And it kicks off with a mandate for rest.
A hard stop. Seth tells them they need to take a complete vacation, and he specifically says they need to dispense with your psychological time experiments during that time.
That's a huge instruction. Those experiments were their advanced work. That was the frontier of what they were doing. To be told to drop it.
It just shows how serious the situation was. This wasn't just, oh, you're a little tired. This was, you are psychically exhausted.
And why? What was the reason for the total shutdown?
Because, he says, they had expended much subconscious energy, and not in constructive ways.
So it's not the work that's tiring them out. It's the conflict.
It's the conflict. All that subconscious fuel was being burned fighting that internal war. The rabbit versus the channel, the fear versus the ambition. All that worry was draining the tanks they needed for the actual channeling.
So step 1 is just admitting that worrying is work, that internal conflict is work. And it's just as draining as productive work, maybe more so.
Absolutely. They had run their engine into the ground on anxiety, so Seth basically gives them a doctor's note from the universe: stop, recharge.
But it's not just about sitting on the couch. The vacation has a very specific purpose, a therapeutic goal.
Sensuous immersion, that is the key.
I love that phrase. He says, sensuous pleasure will do you both much good. A sensuous and psychic immersion into the patterns of nature will refresh you both.
It's a deliberate antidote to their current life, right? Their work is so intellectual, so abstract, so indoors.
Right.
He's telling them they need to ground themselves. They have to reconnect with the solid, physical, non-judgmental reality of the natural world. And it has to be active. They need to use all 5 senses, smell things, touch things.
Get out of their heads and back into their bodies.
And yank themselves out of the psychological drama they've created.
And this can't just be a one-off thing, a single vacation. He's talking about a lifestyle change.
A complete redesign.
Yeah.
He says these small vacations should definitely become a part of your yearly existence. And then he gets really specific.
What does he say?
At the very least, 1 weekend a month should be set aside for sensuous immersion when usual practical considerations are dispensed with.
Dispensing with usual practical considerations, that means turning off the part of your brain that worries about the bills.
Yes. No email, no deadlines, no money worries. You have to consciously choose to just engage, to just experience pleasure for 2 whole days.
Which is so hard for most of us to do. We feel guilty. We feel like we're wasting time.
I know. But Seth directly addresses that anxiety. He promises them that the refreshment they gain will more than make up for, quote, time lost, unquote.
It's an investment, not an expense.
It's an efficiency strategy disguised as a day off. You get so much more clarity and focus back that it pays for itself tenfold.
And he gives very specific advice to Joseph, to Ruburt, the recorder.
Yeah, a very particular assignment for him as a painter. He tells Joseph to take a long, carefree, refreshing, and solitary walk during the time he would normally be painting.
Which is interesting. It's swapping one kind of focus for another.
Exactly. He tells him to become sensuously involved with the trees, landscape, and if possible, lose yourself in their fragrance and vitality. Seth is telling him to switch from what you might call a dissociated focus.
Which is what you need for psychic work, where you kind of step aside mentally.
Right, to a particularized focus,
Yeah.
which is where you intentionally lock your awareness onto the physical, tangible world right in front of you. You use your senses as an anchor.
So if you spend too much time in the abstract, non-physical world, you have to consciously, forcefully reconnect with the physical to stay balanced.
It's the psychic equivalent of touching grass. You have to do it to stay sane. And the main instruction for this walk is critical.
What is it?
He says, forget, if possible, all personal egotistical considerations, feeling only psychic unity.
The egotistical considerations are the worries, the money, the deadlines, the rabbit.
All of it. By merging his awareness with the trees, with nature, which has no ego, he breaks that anxiety loop in his own head. He achieves this psychic unity with the bigger life force that isn't worried about paying rent.
So they're learning to use the physical world as a healing tool instead of seeing it as a threat, which is what the rabbit programming told them to do.
But that's not the end of the prescription. Nature and solitude are great, but they can't solve everything.
Right. There's the problem of becoming ingrown.
Which is what happens when you spend all your time with just one other person, no matter how much you love them. And that brings in the final piece of the puzzle, the psychic safety valve.
Ah, the danger of the echo chamber. Anyone who works closely with a partner knows this feeling.
You just end up recycling the same worries, the same perspectives. Seth says it creates a closed system, and they desperately need variety. They need an influx of new data from other people.
He calls a good friend a psychic breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's a perfect analogy, and he says it's a basic need, like food or water. It acts as a safety valve for built-in pressures.
A safety valve. That implies that if you don't have it, the pressure just builds and builds until something
blows up, or you just fizzle out, which is what was happening to them, the low psychic ebb.
But he's not just talking about venting or complaining to your friends, which is what we usually think of.
No, the benefit is much deeper. It's metaphysical. He says that through our inner senses, our telepathy, we pick up extremely valuable and diversified data from our friends. And that data broadens the psychic base of awareness.
So when you're just having coffee with a friend, your subconscious is like this supercomputer, downloading all their different experiences, their perspectives, their emotional data.
All the stuff that you can't get from your own little world, it's essential data diversification for your subconscious.
It's like your belief system is a diet.
Yeah.
If you only eat one food, Even if it's a good food, you'll end up malnourished. Friends give you different psychological nutrients.
That's it, exactly. They offer new ways of seeing, new solutions that your subconscious can then chew on and integrate. Sim even notes that they've been missing this because their friend Mark hasn't been around, and he tells them to invite people over.
But there's a balance, right? Because for someone like Ruburt, who's so sensitive, too much input could be just as bad.
A critical balance. He adds the warning. Too many influences of this nature would be distracting, but some are definitely necessary.
So you have to find that sweet spot. Enough outside data to keep you fresh, but not so much that you get overwhelmed and lose your own focus.
It's targeted, meaningful exchange, not just constant social noise.
Okay, so let's recap the whole prescription for everyone listening.
The idea.
First, you have to face the fear, the inner rabbit. Then, you understand that your reality is being limited by a narrow, fear-based expectation.
Right. The two-way door.
And then you take the 3 actions. 1, you stop everything, total break. 2, you re-anchor yourself in the physical world through sensuous immersion in nature.
Particularized focus.
And 3, you open the windows and get a psychic breath of fresh air by connecting with a few good friends.
And it's all about reclaiming a sense of psychological freedom. Seth even says that because their apartment was small, it had limited their freedom, so they needed to consciously go out and create new freedoms to compensate.
They had to manufacture exuberance to fight back against the confinement.
And the way Seth ends the session is it's the ultimate proof of his point.
It's a total mic drop.
He literally tells them, I am not going to hold a regular session this evening, but will end it soon. As a special favor in this direction, I will end the session.
He cuts short the very thing that is their work, their passion, their potential income.
To force them to go rest.
It's the ultimate statement that psychic health is more important than productivity in that moment.
And he reassures them. He says they're in no danger of a severe depression, but he's stepping in way ahead of time to catch them before they really hit a wall.
It's just an amazing session. It takes this from just, you should take a break, to this really sophisticated model of how your childhood programming and your metaphysical expectations can literally drain your subconscious batteries.
And how the only way to recharge them is through physical, sensuous, and social connection.
For me, the thing that will stick with me is that idea that fear drives aggression, that the timid rabbit puts on the hilarious performance.
Right.
It just makes you look at every loud, super confident person differently. Were they really in control or are they just terrified?
And that links right back to the two-way door. You can believe you're worthy, but if you expect the world to be hostile, you will create a hostile world to prove yourself right.
The only way out is to expand your expectation, to include the possibility of safety, of ease, of acceptance.
So what's the takeaway here for you, for everyone listening? I think it's that even the most advanced people can be brought down by the simplest psychological habits.
And the prescription they received. Rest, nature, friends. It's not complicated. It's a timeless manual for anyone who feels burned out or anxious or just stuck.
And that brings us to the final thought. Seth told them to find freedoms to compensate for their limitations. So the question for you is, what personal freedoms, what non-productive digressions do you need to reclaim in your life right now? What do you need to do to compensate for the energy you've lost to your own internal battles and external pressures?
Don't wait for a crisis. What small act of sensuous immersion can you schedule this week? A walk without your phone, a weekend with no practical considerations. What do you need to do to get that psychic breath of fresh air?
That's a powerful question to sit with.
It really is. And if you want to explore these ideas and this material in much more depth, we can't recommend it enough. Study the Seth Material books and go visit the New Awareness Network's website and bookstore. You can find it at sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into psychic health straight from session 77.
Until next time, stay curious and keep diving deep.